Can y'all see it? Yeah. Oh, y'all are muted. Okay. Yeah. All right. As always, I always get a little nervous for these, so I apologize in advance. Also, this isn't the most beautiful project, but we had a couple snags, but I'm kind of happy with what we're turning out right now, so just get right into it. Let's see. Try to put it on slideshow mode. There we go. So my project was on the effects of function-based treatment on elopement. Okay. And so with this project, we were working with two learners that were both emitting elopement behavior. Student A was a 4-year-old female, and student B was also a 4-year-old male. Both of them had the pre-verbal foundational cuss and were both able to do a coex and were working on the mand and tax cuss. And the ABC data determined that student A's elopement behavior was being maintained by escape and access and occurred during demand conditions. Student B's ABC data showed that it was being maintained by access and attention, and was occurring primarily in alone and during transition conditions. And that was like transition, like we would go from one place to the other. So kind of like switching classrooms and whatnot. Let's see. And so this is where it gets a little fuzzy. So for student A, our design was an ABACDE design, and the independent variables included instruction following, differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors, a code to man for break, and we also went ahead and had to implement escape extinction. The experimental design for student B was an ABCD design, and the independent variables were a code to man program, which we kind of used as his functional communication training, differential reinforcements of alternative behaviors, as well as a token economy. And there were a couple of modifications that were made to his behaviors of concern. So we went ahead and did planned ignoring. And let's see. Oh, dependent variables were both of the learners consist of percentage of intervals in which the learner remained in their designated areas. And remaining in designated area was defined as learners staying within like an arm's length of the distance of the technician and only leaving technician sides when appropriate. So like if we told them to line up or something like that, that was appropriate. So we expected them to be a little bit further than arm's length away. Let's see, on this, where we kind of talk about kind of where it kind of went awry a little bit, but due to multiple treatments being put in place during the study, a functional relationship was unable to be determined, and this was identified as a limitation. Another limitation within the study was that there was a shift in technicians that work with the learners, as well as, and this was kind of due to one of the learners, student B, he was emitting more dangerous elopement behavior, where he was kind of like going around the clinic and whatnot, and we wanted to make sure like we had support put in place, and we were finding that the protocols that we were putting in place weren't getting presented and done with high fidelity. So we went ahead and shift tech. So that kind of also was a little bit of a setting event or a confounding variable. The next one, my literature review. And so elopement behavior is defined as attempts to leave an assigned area without consent. And approximately 34% of learners who are diagnosed with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and 49% of learners that are diagnosed with autism emit elopement behavior. So it's pretty prevalent. And due to the potential endangerment of the learner that result from elopement, those who engage in elopement behavior often are placed within more restrictive environments because they can't be left unattended. And another barrier that is concerned with elopement is that, let's see, they have a limited level of independence. They're greatly likely to be subject to more dangerous situations, and in general experience a lower level of autonomy. And then I just kind of go into saying like why we use the functional behavior assessment, the ABC data, and it's been known to show, and And I really like it because you kind of look at the antecedent as well as behavior as well as the consequence. You can kind of get a good understanding of like what exactly is happening in detail before the behavior as well as after the behavior occurs. And so that's what I kind of use to determine if the behavior was multiply maintained by something or at least what it was being maintained by. Let's go to the next one. And this kind of goes in and talks about how when learners have a lower level of verbal behavior, that often leads them to engage in more maladaptive behaviors. So that's why I kind of came to the consensus that I wanted to use functional communication training to kind of engage the learner in more appropriate behaviors. And it's kind of like my differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. And just kind of get that going. That way they have that communication instead of engaging in that elopement behavior. So it says treatment of elopement behavior, where data from 12 studies from functional analysis were conducted found that 60% of elopement was being maintained by access to tangibles and 25% of elopement was being maintained by escape. And that was kind of what we were seeing with both of our learners. So functional communication teaches the learner an appropriate alternative behavior for accessing items when the target behavior is functioning as a way to access these items. And for them, we kind of put in place an echoic to man program. Let's see, in order to effectively replace the behavior, the experimenter must provide the learner with another appropriate alternative behavior to engage in that will grant the learner access to a greater level of reinforcement. And that's kind of a really important part of making sure, like when you do have an alternative behavior, like you want to make sure it's something that is not as, I guess they can access the reinforcement, but in a way that is less of a response effort on the learner. Because if there's more of a response effort and it's not as reinforcing, they're just going to continue to engage in that maladaptive behavior. Let's see. And both of the learners know how to echo, so that's why I went ahead and we put in place the echo to man for items. That way they could access. Providing the learner with language aids the learner in communicating effectively with others, as well as provides the learner with an appropriate outlet in which they can access reinforcement. Another tactic used to increase learners' emission of appropriate behaviors is the implementation of a token economy. And we kind of just use this as like a generalized reinforcer. Both of the kids had condition tokens as their reinforcers. So, and they were able to trade in those tokens for highly reinforcing items. So we used them for like when they transition from classroom to other places. Like if they went through the whole transition without elopement, they would get $1, and they would also get like something a little extra like sensory or tickles or a good job, just depending on the learner and what they found reinforcing. Another effective treatment used to decrease behaviors of concern is escape extinction in combination with DRA. In a study implemented by Battelle and colleagues, tested the effects of 2 differential reinforcement procedures with escape extinction to treat food refusal. In the study, 3 learners with feeding disorders participated in the study. When the learners were only exposed to differential reinforcement alone, acceptance and mouth cleans of food remained at 0 levels. Although when differential reinforcement in combination with this escape extinction were put in place, all 3 learners had an increase in acceptance of food and mouth clean. Data from the study found that once escape extinction was added to the differential reinforcement procedure, that food acceptance and mouth cleans increased independent upon reinforcement being delivered or not. So they also had really good maintaining effects after the tactics were taken out. And that's kind of what we use as well with the escape extinction and the differential reinforcement of alternative behavior for one of our little learners. And let's see. Oh, I don't know if I added all the things I'm supposed to put. Okay. The purpose of the study was to further support research on applying function-based tactics to intervene on behaviors of concern. Both the learner's elopement behavior was maintained by different functions, one being maintained for escape access and another for attention and access to tangibles. Tactics that were applied with each learner consist of the DRA in the form of functional communication training and the use of token economy as a way for both learners to access a source of reinforcement. Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot to take that out. We ended up not doing the weight program, sorry. Let's see. So this is my method, and we just kind of talk a little bit about the participants. So student A, as I mentioned before, was a 4-year-old female that was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. The learner had the preverbal CUS as well as the code CUS and was currently working on demanding and tacting and did not have listener literacy. Communication-wise, student A mastered 3 to 5 word to code demands and behaviors of concern that the learner engaged in consists of hitting, climbing, crying, eating non-food items, kicking, property disruption, throwing, and elopement. And the learner received ABA therapy at TCAR 5 days a week for 32 hours a week, and student A also receives speech therapy once a week. So there's a couple, so like once a week she had like a half day, and then every other week we would have a half day for on Fridays as well. And student B, 4-year-old boy that was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. He also had all of his preverbal foundation and coex that were intact for CUS and was currently working on manding and tacting. In regards to manding, the learner was able to echo 3-syllable mands, and behaviors of concern that the learner engaged in was flapping, flopping, mouthing, climbing, pushing others, hitting, whining, elopement, and tantruming behavior. And tantruming behavior was defined as emitting 2 behaviors at once. So he could be whining and also pushing, or at least 2 behaviors, whining and pushing, or whining and flopping, and that would be considered a tantrum. And Sumi currently receives ABA therapy at TCOR 5 days a week for 33 hours a week. And Sumi also receives speech therapy once a week on Wednesday. So he also had half days sometimes. Let's see the setting. So the setting was TCAR, and it primarily took place inside the classroom, the main classroom, but also because of elopement that was occurring whenever we transitioned from room to room. We also considered like the T cord, I guess like the building's like 14th floor, because we kind of went all over just to test things out and make sure like he could walk side by side with a technician. So we did a lot of different things with him. So I would say probably the whole 14th floor, maybe, or at least the main routes, like the hallways and stuff. And they also had access to what was called the Rainbow Room. And the Rainbow Room is just kind of like a big open classroom area where they can go if they have like a big toy that they need to play with and they need a little bit extra space, because all the learners pretty much shared the main classroom. They all had their own like tables and stuff, but they all shared the main classroom. And all the kiddos in there had their own tech that they did one-to-one sessions. So, but the Rainbow Room was also open for them to go in if they needed as like an additional play area. Let's see, materials. So we had timers, and this was used for data for elopement and was recorded on 15-minute intervals. An additional timer was used to keep track of the learner's break time. So that was also used for the escape extinction, where we did give her the functional communication training to ask for a break, and then we would time that for a minute, and then we would reintroduce the instruction after the minute. Paper dollars served as the token economy, and the learners were given these dollars contingent upon emitting appropriate behaviors or correct responses, and served as general reinforcers for the learner. The elopement data sheet was also used, and it was, I think I do have oh yeah, there it is. And this is kind of what it looks like. It's kind of hard to explain, but I feel like when y'all see it, it makes more sense. So I just went ahead and just put like an example. As you can see, like the whole day is broken up in 15-minute intervals, and you would put a plus or minus. If elopement did occur, it was a minus. If it didn't occur, it was a plus. And what we were doing was that we were trying to figure out the percentage of time, pretty much, that they were remaining in their designated area, which would be the foot or so from the tech when appropriate. And we also had the technicians put their initials. That way we kind of know, like, okay, if they were with a group setting and they were with another learner, maybe, see if there was any correlations with that, if it continued to occur. So yeah, that's what that data sheet looks like. All right, we're going to jump into the design. This is where it gets a little crazy, so I apologize. So, oops, there we go. So this is for student A. Her design was an ABACDE. And so phase A, the percentage of intervals in which the learner remained in their designated area. These percentages were graphed each day. Baseline was first acquired until a stable state of responding was achieved, and ABCI was recorded during this time. And this is, we pretty much just lumped up her ABC data. So these were the antecedent conditions, as you can see, as well as the consequence conditions. So it's pretty prevalent that most of the time elopement was occurring was during demand situations, and the consequence was escape, access, as well as sensory. Okay, this is more of the design. So in phase B, a follow directions program was put in place, as well as social praise was given for complying with instruction. And with the follow directions program, we made sure that other technicians were also running the program. During this time, I was working with this learner. And so I was making sure like other people were also running the program, and it was also being ran in different settings. So sometimes we had like circle time where we had group instruction, and other times we had like solo where I would just kind of think to myself, okay, I'm going to run this program and see if she gets a plus or a minus. And we also did it in multiple settings. So sometimes it would take place in the bathroom or the rainbow room or wherever. And then when she met criterion for the follow directions program, we went ahead and moved into phase A. And so in that phase, I removed the follow directions program. I just wanted to see like if I don't give her social reinforcement for following directions, does the behavior remain the same, or does it increase, or does elopement, I just wanted to know what would happen to elopement. So that was kind of like sort of my reversal-ish. But anyhow, so let's see. Once the decision opportunity was available, phase C was put in place. So during this time, there wasn't like a significant change like it did. Elopement did occur more frequently. So we went ahead and threw in another tactic to see if we can put it back to more of like 100%, because with elopement, it's such a dangerous behavior. It's not something you want to keep at like 90% or 96%, even though it is high. You still want it to be like 100%, because there's no time in which you want a kid to elope. So we were still trying to look for different tactics that would possibly help kind of increase that remains in designated area. And let's see. And during reintroduction of phase A, there was a shift in technicians working with both student B and A due to the increase in behaviors of concern being emitted by student B, as well as the inconsistency in running protocols with a high level of fidelity. So we decided to go ahead and switch from me working with student A to go ahead and work with student B. So we had a shift in technicians. And that's why we implemented phase C, just to kind of show that there was a break. And say, due to there not being significant increase in the learners remaining in their designated area after the reintroduction of phase A, phase C was put in place where differential reinforcement permitting appropriate alternative behaviors for raising hand when manning for technician's attention, as well as walking by technician's side when transitioning to and from classroom. So that's when we put in place the walking by my side program, as well as having the learner raise their hand whenever they needed assistance or wanted the technician's attention. Because a lot of times, like, they would be sitting at the table and then they would just kind of walk across the classroom without letting anyone know, like, oh, I wanted to throw this away, or oh, I wanted to pick up another marker, which is fine. But we just wanted to make sure like they were letting us know like where they were going, because it can be unsafe if you're not in a classroom setting, you're more so in an open setting. So we wanted to make sure to kind of control that a little bit. Let's see. So we go into phase D, seeing that data in phase C displayed a variable descending trend. We put in place functional communication training where the learner would then echo, I want break. And so during this phase, like in phase C anyways, when we had that shift in technicians, we started seeing elopement occurring more so during instruction when at the table. So that's why we put in the I want break program. Let's see. In this phase, if the learner did not comply with the instruction, the learner was provided with a code command for a break. Once echoed, the learner was given 1 minute break. After the minute, the original instruction was reintroduced. The learner left the table Where instruction took place, the learner was provided minimal attention and blocked from accessing reinforcers, and attention was provided to other learners in the classroom that were following the classroom rules, and preferred items were provided to those learners. Once the learner returned to the table, the learner was presented with learn units and was given neutral tone vocal reinforcement just to kind of close out the learn units. So if they did get something right, it was just kind of it was an approval, but it wasn't like hyped up as it usually is. Let's see. Once the learner received their set number of tokens, the learner was then granted access to preferred items. So it was kind of also kind of like a response effort. Like if you do leave, then now you have to work for, whatever it is that you want. Now we have to do learn units. Let's see. Development occurred for access, and a code command for the item was presented to the learner. After echoing the command, the teacher then applied the pre-map principle, with the learner first needing to sit at the table and earn dollars prior to gaining access to the item. And then seeing that there wasn't a very big or significant change in data, we went ahead and intervened into phase D. Let's see. If development were to occur during transition, the learner was blocked from access to items and provided the code to command I want whatever item that might have been, and transition back to the room and have the learner gain access to the item. Functional communication was also used as an antecedent approach for elopement during instruction. If the learner were not to comply with the demands, the learner was provided with the code to demand for a break. Once echoed and 1 minute timer was started, minimal attention was given. Once the minute elapsed, instruction resumed. So then we moved into phase E. Due to data in phase D displaying a variable descending a trend, when attention was removed from the learner, when elopement occurred, escape extinction was then put in place. So we wanted to make sure that we exhausted kind of all of the reinforcement kind of tactics that we could put in place. And we did we gave minimal attention during phase D to see if we did not give them attention, if they would return back to the table. And that would kind of give us an indication like, okay, elopement is occurring because they're wanting access or it's being maintained by access if they're coming back to the table. But we weren't seeing that. So we were then kind of came to the consensus that like, okay, this is truly because they want to escape instruction. So that's why we went ahead and went into the escape extinction. During this phase, if elopement was being maintained for access during transition, and a COIC command was provided to the learner, if omitted, the pre-map principle, first then language of kind of like what we did in the last phase. Like first we have to earn the dollars, and then we can go and get that item. Let's see. If escape is the function during or immediately before demand, the learner leaves the designated area. The teacher provided the learner with the code, I need a break. If the learner engaged in elopement from the table and the teacher has not already provided the learner with a break due to other escape behaviors, the teacher provided the learner with the code to demand for a break. Once echoed, a 1 minute timer was started and minimal attention was given. Once the minute was up, instruction resumed. If the code was not emitted, the teacher presented 3 trials to the learner until 3 correct responses were emitted. And that was generally just a 0.2. So we would just follow the learner wherever they went, 0.2, 0.2. Once we got 3, redirected them, gave them simple instructions, like if they were to be sitting or something, stand up, go to the table, and then we would continue on and get learn units, and then they could trade in for a preferred item. Yeah, I think that kind of covers that one. Okay, and so we're still currently doing escape extinction with student A, and I wish I had my graphs. I know we're going to be presenting that, but at least it would kind of give you an indication of like how it's going. It's hard to talk about it and then not see it, I guess. But as of right now, last time I checked, it was ascending. So hoping
do you have a paper graph or anything that you can show, even if it's not like pretty?
Oh man,
no worries if not.
No, I don't think. Well, I might. I don't have it on this laptop. This is my personal laptop. I've got it on my school laptop, the school one that I have. But it'd be interesting for me to try to show it to you, I guess, from my work laptop.
Don't worry about it.
Sorry. All right, we can kind of move into student B's. So student B's was an ABCD design, and phase A consisted of baseline. And during baseline, the learner was provided verbal redirection when elopement occurred, and ABC data was taken on the behavior. And with student B, his elopement behavior was more so, I would say it was a bit more dangerous than student A's because he would literally flee from the technician. So with him, like we didn't really want to spend a whole lot of time in baseline because I know we usually get like a stable state of responding, but since his was so kind of dangerous, we wanted to make sure we intervened as soon as possible and kind of started putting some things in place to try to increase that remains in designated area. So that's why his, like when y'all do see his graph, it's going to be a little bit different from student A's. And let's see, phase B, okay. So in phase B, the intervention put in place consisted of a DRA for walking next to teacher during transition. We also put in place functional communication training for a code to man for items in play area. Because a lot of times he would sit at the table and it would be great. And then he would just kind of stand up and just, we had this really big shelving unit in the main classroom that had all of our toys and stuff. And so what he would do, he would just stand up and he'd walk right over to the shelving unit, and then he would say, I want help, which I mean it made sense, but we wanted to make sure like he was echoing and manning for those things while at his designated area by the teacher. Because I mean, if you think about it, if this were to happen outside in the real world, if he's walking down the street with his mom and stuff and he just kind of walks across, a street or something, it could be really dangerous. So we wanted to make sure we try to control that as much as possible and kind of really harness that in. So we also did a listener responding program for Come Here, and also oh yeah, walking next to teacher. We said that. Okay. During walking next to teacher for transition, learners received $1 for staying within an appropriate distance of the technician. And during transitions, received vocal and sensory reinforcement from the technician. So as we're walking, like we would talk about like what we see. We would tell friends hi because we had like a receptionist and stuff. So we tell her hi and be like, oh, I see elevators, and oh, the doors are rectangle shaped. So we would constantly be kind of giving him attention and kind of keeping him busy with that. That way, hopefully, he would be emitting those behaviors as we modeled them. And let's see. For a code to man and play area, the learner was to emit mans for items while staying in their designated areas. So with that, I kind of just watched him and I looked for observing responses from him, like if he was actively looking at another kid's toy, or if I noticed him kind of making eyes with the shelving unit, kind of give me the cue, pick up on those precursor behaviors of like, okay, I probably need to get him to man for it before he just, crawls in. And he would do that. He would just crawl under the table and go straight to the shelving unit. So I would just kind of look for his own cues, his precursor behaviors, and that would kind of help me know of like, okay, I need to probably change out his reinforcers or, have him man for a new one. That way he's not just taking it upon himself to walk over and, of course, engage in the elopement behavior. So I wanted to provide him with that functional communication. And that alternative. Let's see. And then listener responding program for Come Here. This consists of the learner. At first, it just consisted of him just standing next to us and us saying Come Here, and then we'd give him some kind of social reinforcement. He was very big on sensory, so sometimes it was like a head rub or like, just like rubbing a shoulder or something. Be like, yeah, that's coming here. And then as he mastered that program, we would extend the length of which he was to come to us and stuff. And we also ran that program only when we had another technician present they could help us with prompting if it was needed, which he did really well with it. So there were very few times we had to prompt. Let's see, in phase C, that was played in phase B. Oh, and this is when we had the transition from text because the learning units were not being put in place and they just weren't being ran consistently or with a high level of fidelity. And when TPRs were being done, we weren't getting consistent responses with the current technicians. So in phase C, I started working with the learner, and we just continued the same programs, but I was the one working with them. And so let's see. So we moved into phase D because he was doing really well, and we would have maybe like one time where we'd have elopement with the programs that were put in place, and as he was moving through them, he was doing really well, and we'd have like maybe one occurrence of elopement per day. And so we started kind of and we started kind of doing our some 2-to-1 sessions where I'd have an additional tech come with me, and we would kind of try to, I kind of felt like we were picking on him a little bit, like poking prod him to like see, under what conditions is he eloping, or is he being more flexible, or do we need to assist in more kinds of ways? And we really, and he had 2 sessions per day where it was a 2-to-1, where this additional tech was with me, and I had support and stuff. And he did really well, but we still weren't getting those 100% levels. So we went ahead and jumped into phase D, because when we did find that he was eloping, it was during tantruming behavior, and it was during novel situations. So that was also another thing. We were having another tech kind of come in and disturb the piece a little bit, and kind of put some different barriers in his way to kind of see of like how he reacted or what we needed to put in place. And that's how we kind of went ahead and put in place the planned ignoring for tantruming behavior. And so in phase D, planned ignoring was placed as a protocol for the learner's behavior when tantrums occur. During this phase, if the learner engaged in tantrum behavior detection, the technician provided minimal attention to the learner. And once calm for 5 seconds, the technician then provided the learner with the echoic "I'm ready." If he echoed with a calm body, the technician then provided the learner with simple instructions in neutral tone to pick up whatever he may have destroyed or whatever. And then he would sit at the table, and then we'd go ahead and I'd start presenting learn units with him. And after he got $10, then he could trade in for kind of a preferred item. So it's a little bit similar to what we did with student A. And so this was the experimental procedure for student A and B. Data was collected on elopement throughout the entirety of the day on that data sheet that I showed y'all. And elopement was measured through 15 whole interval recordings. So if elopement occurred during the session, during that interval, a minus was recorded. If elopement did not occur, a plus was recorded. And that was for the whole 15-minute interval. Let's see, the technician was to set the 15-minute timer. When the timer sounded, the technician recorded the learner's behavior. The percentage of correct responses for all programs were graphed when the learner reached the set number of opportunities, and we used the decision tree protocol. So as soon as a graph went to a decision, whether it be a program or the learner's behavior graphs, because we kind of kept a really close eye on their elopement graph, we would go ahead and that would kind of cue us that, okay, we need to start finding other things to put in place to kind of manage it a little bit better. And so kind of going to the experimental procedures for student A. As we know, tactics put in place were follow directions, raise hand when walks next to teacher. For follow directions program, the learner was to follow the verbal direction within 5 seconds of the technician emitting the antecedent. If the learner did follow through with the instruction, a plus was recorded as well as given social reinforcement. And criterion was set at 90% times 2 across 10 opportunities. Raising hand, for that one, a plus was recorded whenever the learner did raise their hand to get the technician's attention. Sorry, and we were just trying to reduce the rate of them just eloping in general and kind of getting the technician's attention appropriately. We also wanted them to kind of get them ready for school type situations, because when you're in school, you're going to be raising your hand to get the teacher's attention rather than calling out or things like that. So we went ahead and did a raise hand program. And criteria was set at 100% for correct response across 10 opportunities. Walk by my side was also put in place for transitioning. And before we would transition, we would simply give the antecedent walk by my side, and then we would give social reinforcement throughout. And give them $1 whenever they did make it to the destination without elopement. A minus was recorded and the learner was given the if the learner did elope, a minus was recorded and the learner was given the verbal redirection to walk by the side of the technician. And the long-term objective for this is that the learner will walk by the technician's side for 100% across 5 consecutive days. Student A is still working on this, but student B has mastered it, so that's pretty exciting. And we'll just move into student B. So tasks that's been in place were a command program, come here program, as well as walk on my side program. And I forgot to put in here for some reason, man for items when in play area, which he actually just mastered like yesterday. So, oh no, today. Yeah, he mastered that today. So the criterion for the long-term objective was met for a program when the learner manned for items while in their designated area. So that was today. The other program was approach the technician, which we kind of talked about earlier. And criterion for that would be 100% across 10 opportunities. So we're still kind of working on that right now. He's working on, I think it's 6 feet, or maybe it's 4. I'll have to, we just changed it, but it might be 6 feet. I think it is 6 feet, yeah. And we're doing that across multiple technicians as well, just to make sure it generalizes as well as in different settings. Let's see. Another program that put in place was Walk by My Side program, which I've told you guys that he is actually mastered, so he's doing real well with that one. Yeah, so he's actually mastered quite a few things, and we're getting to the end of some of these programs, so he's doing pretty well. Super proud of him. All right, data collection. Data was recorded the same way for both learners in the study in regards to data collection with the 15-minute interval, and the percentage of remaining in designated areas were recorded for their remains in designated area graph. It was called elopement, but we decided to change it to remains in designated areas since that's what we were actually graphing. All right, and then baseline for both learners. The technicians were to just kind of go about the session as they regularly would, if that included them giving a verbal reprimand or planned ignoring. We all documented that in the ABC data, and we just took baseline. And for, like I said earlier, student B's elopement was a bit more dangerous than student A, so we made sure to kind of intervene in him as soon as possible, as soon as we got that ABC data, really. And for student A, we kind of waited for a more stable state of responding. Let's see, treatment. And for this one, I just kind of listed the, which I may have done this wrong, but I thought this was right. For student A, I listed the programs that we put in place, which we just discussed, and the raising hand, and just kind of like why we put those in place. So the raising hand was kind of like a differential reinforcement for getting the technicians attention appropriately, and escape extinction, of course, was to reduce the to not let them escape whenever they were to escape during demand situations. And for student B, we had the Walk by My Side program, so we could give reinforcement contingent upon him transitioning appropriately and following directions. So the Come Here program. Here, let's see, variables. The independent variable for both learners in the study was the percentage of intervals in the day in which the learner engaged in elopement behavior. Elopement behavior is defined as leaving designated area for at least 2 feet without adult permission for any duration of time. Independent variables for student A were all the programs that we put in place: the Walk on My Side, instruction following, raising hand, escape extinction. And student B's independent variables consisted of the Code to Man, Walk on My Side, and I left the weight program in there again. Sorry guys, it's not supposed to be in there. And then a Code to Man for items in designated area, and yeah. Oh, and also the modification that we made for his tantruming. So this is my limitations. It's a little lengthy, As I discussed before, the multiple treatment interference was present within the study, hindering the researcher's ability to clearly identify which variables from the study were responsible and increasing the learner's intervals and remaining in designated area. To provide clear results in determining a functional relationship, researchers will need to put in place maybe a component analysis is what I was thinking, where they kind of just dissect the treatment package they would want to use and kind of see what components were more beneficial in reducing the learner's behavior rather than what I kind of did where I just put them all together, but really dissecting those different variables and seeing where the reductions in behavior were, or if, if it was there was only a reduction in behavior when two variables were put together, and just kind of seeing what worked and what didn't work. Another limitation within the study was that there was a shift in technicians working with the learners, which may have been a confounding variable with the study. Due to student B's emitting a high frequency of behaviors of concern, the current technician having difficulty in adhering to the current elopement protocol and receiving a number of error TPRAs when implementing the elopement protocol, it was in the best interest of the client to shift technicians during that time, since elopement was such a dangerous behavior for him. And we just wanted to make sure we were being as safe as possible. Initially, like, it would be best to maybe put in additional training, but due to the lack of time, we wanted to make sure, and with it being such a dangerous behavior, we wanted to make sure that he was coming in contact with those contingencies appropriately and getting those learning units frequently. Another effect from changing out technicians was the alteration in function, the learner's elopement behavior. For student A, ABC data that was obtained indicated that elopement behavior was being maintained by attention. When the shift in technicians occurred, intervention put in place, it was more so like in the instruction. So whenever I had student A, it was kind of like attention and there was some escape. And then whenever we had a shift in technician, it was more so for escape that we found a little bit. In future studies, to avoid confounding variables associated with the learner having a behavior change due to a change in technicians, the technician working with the learner should stay consistent throughout the entirety of the study, and possibly additional training should be put in place to ensure that the technician can accurately implement the protocols consistently and with high fidelity. Discussion for future studies, all technicians should possess the same credentials across in regards to being able to implement protocols consistently and reliably prior to intervention being put in place. Technicians working with the learner should also be calibrated and running programs to criterion levels. By having technicians sufficiently trained ensures that there would be no need to change technicians in the middle of implementing an intervention, avoiding tampering the study from confounding variables associated with changing technicians within the study. And for future studies, it may also be beneficial to implement possibly a functional analysis to determine the function of the behavior. So maybe even when we had the shift in technicians, maybe we should have done an FA just to see, like maybe gone back to baseline and done an FA to see, with having a different technician and possibly a different instructional control, is the elopement behavior being maintained on under something different from the previous technician. By putting in place a functional analysis, will better clarify under what conditions is the learner behavior being maintained, as well as if the learner's behavior is being multiple maintained, and possessing a better understanding under what conditions is the behavior being maintained under. That way, effective interventions can be put in place in an efficient manner. And these are my references. So sorry, it was a bit longer than I expected.
Nice job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so scared.
No, you did great.
Lie.
And
okay.
I get that, like when you're nervous, it's a good crutch to have all that info on the slide. And I think what I hope you experienced a little bit was when you were your most clear was when you read something and that triggered something else that you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just started talking about that. Like that's
Yeah.
when it's easiest to follow and
Hmm.
see what you want to say. So know that that's a good thing and that's a strength there, and use that to help pare down what's on the slides. But great
Yeah.
information throughout. I mean, you obviously you have a handle on what you did, and you guys did a lot. So I'm really proud of what you put together there. Good job. Good job.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I want to ask one question from the start before I open it up to everybody else. I'd like you you hit the hammer on the nail on the head with the limitations there at the end, and I want you to try and this is open to everyone, but I want to make sure that you understand this as well, Rianne. What in like one sentence, what is your limitation?
In one sentence.
So all the limitations that you put in are all accurate, but they all relate to one thing.
Would it be? Do you want me to say what kind of limitation it is?
Now it's
No.
like, what is the limitation?
I would say it was just not having a well-developed verbal behavior on the technician's part, possibly. Oh, I
I
didn't
think,
adhere to a reversal design like I
yeah.
wanted to.
Okay.
So there's that.
But
Yeah.
that all of those both of those fall into what I'm thinking of for the underlying limitation.
Is it experimental control?
Mm.
Related to one thing. There's one thing here that I think is super important for everyone to be able to see. And it's that you tried to run a study in the context of an applied setting.
Mm.
You didn't create an experimental setting within TCARD to run the study. So when you're talking about the tactics that you use and the phases and the lack of training in a experimental study, like in a well-controlled study where the text now, like all of that is taken care of on the front end. Does that make sense? So you wouldn't have tech, like you wouldn't start using I'm not going to say a technician, but a researcher to collect data unless they had already been calibrated to the nth degree and you knew they weren't going to make any errors. You wouldn't, there's, I'm trying to remember some of the other specifics, but just each point of the way, it was very clear to me that you're doing your job today, literally with these two kiddos, and you're overlaying a design on top of that. Does that make sense? And that's where you went from your ABA into CDE. Like it started off good, and then you're like, but now I'm going to do all the other stuff that I kind of have to, right? And that obviously removes experimental control, and you just started throwing things at it. But that's exactly why applied research is different than applied behavior analysis, right? So if you are, how do I want to say it? If you are studying the effectiveness of a tactic, you don't do all those other phases because you are trying to study the tactic specifically. And if you can't get control, that means the tactic doesn't work. Just that's it. If you are trying to use intervention, this is going to be a little bit more confusing. If you're trying to use interventions to achieve a certain level of responding, and that level of responding is your independent variable, then it doesn't matter what tactics you use to get there. So you don't put your CVE, right? So like, for example, not your example, but for example, let's say you're doing a conditioning procedure. All right. My goal is to get a child to look at books for 80% of 5-second intervals, right? I use 5-second pair tests. I use 20-second pair tests. I use conjugate reinforcement. I use all these other things. I don't care what gets me there because I want to see what is the effect once they manipulate something for 80% of these intervals. So I use all 50,000 different tactics because I don't care about them. And that's kind of the situation that you're in. You're looking for a particular behavior. It doesn't really matter how you get there. You can put in different interventions. You can put in different tactics. We don't look at those as experimental phases. Does that make sense? Okay. I think that idea, when you're doing applied research in particular, or research in an applied setting, I think that makes a big difference. So we don't have to look at every iteration of the intervention as its own phase. Okay? And I think that when you talk about having to switch text and move this around and rearrange this contingency or whatever, like, great, you're still doing the one thing. And that's all that matters for phases. And I think that will help when finding experimental control. Okay, cool. That's a great lesson to experience, because I bet as you were going through this, you were like, crap, this is changing, and now this, and then now what do I do, and how do I write this up? And there's probably, like, in the moment, a lot of stress for, like, oh my God, I've lost this experimental control, right? And it's not quite the same thing. And that's why it's important to look at the experimental side different from the applied side. Okay. But you explained, honestly, you explained it great. I was able to follow all the different steps. Yeah, I know. you really did. And I think that the kind of the analysis of what went wrong is a really good opportunity for you. Okay. Awesome. Nice job. All right. Any other thoughts and feedback for Rianne? Indeed. Awesome. You're off the hook, Rianne. You're done. You got it out of the way. I know that's that negative reinforcement. That's the biggest thing there, right? Awesome. Okay. Caitlin, you think you can squeeze it in?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's go ahead, and Courtney, we'll see what time we end up, and we'll see where if you go tonight or first off next week. Okay.
Dun dun dun.
Okay, and Caitlin should be able to share your screen.
Okay, I'm trying to get my slideshow up.
Yep, you're good.
Can y'all see it?
Yep, it's up there.
Okay. All right, let me move myself. Okay. So I did mine on the effects of say-do correspondence on classroom behavior. Mine was a study done on only one student. It's just how it worked out in our clinic. Things have just been crazy because we had, still COVID, hurricanes, everything. All right, so the current study is a varied replication of work done by Whitman in 1982. The purpose of this study was to test the effects of say-do correspondence on classroom rule following behavior using a multiple baseline design. More specifically, classroom rules included standing for the pledge, exiting the bathroom quickly, and leaving recess without crying. I'm not gonna fully get into my literature review. I just put a few things in here. Children with ASD often struggle with and perform below criterion and related to social skills compared to peers. This is especially true in classroom settings where rule following is expected and consequences follow for not practicing compliance with the rules. Studies have shown that students with ASD struggle with rule following more than their typically developing peers. When a student doesn't comply with classroom rules, it causes disruptions in the class that hinder teaching time and learning. I'm going to take a lot of breaths in between. I'm pregnant and I can't breathe. So and I have asthma. So I'm just I promise I'm not dying. I'm just trying to breathe. Rule governed behavior is behavior that is controlled by verbal descriptions of contingencies. For typically developing individuals, rule governed behaviors help to shape the way life is experienced. However, for individuals diagnosed with autism, rule governed behavior is not always self-learned and must be taught. Say-do correspondence is one tactic used to teach this behavior. Past research has demonstrated that say-do correspondence or correspondence training is effective in decreasing the rate of problematic behaviors displayed by children with intellectual disabilities in preschool classrooms. There's lots of research behind that. They're all kind of listed after this. Breathing. Okay. So say-do correspondence establishes a relationship between verbal and nonverbal behaviors. The say and the do, the relationship is developed by differential reinforcement of matching the say behavior to the do behavior. In fact, in one study, they proposed that the relationship developed between say and do during correspondence training may lead to the development of verbal self-regulation. So, findings by Whitman suggested that the implementation of say-do correspondence was an effective treatment for problem behaviors emitted by a student with intellectual disabilities. Positive behavior in the form of praise and tangibles were used to reinforce the participants' behavior. The results demonstrated that the introduction of the say-do correspondence training helped to decrease problem behavior for all the participants in their study. The results also suggested that this tactic can produce generalized changes in behavior. So my whole project was basically based on their findings. So the method. One participant was used in this experiment. He was a 6-year-old boy diagnosed with ASD. He attended a pre-K in a private school with typically developing peers. The student demonstrated high rates of non-compliance with classroom rule following. All baseline and training sessions were held daily throughout all classroom instruction times, as well as during enrichment times. The observation and training procedures were designed in a way that the tech would not interfere with regular classroom times and do not distract the peers in the classroom setting. After say-do correspondence trials, the experimenter, me, would pull the student aside to the corner of the classroom to quietly provide specific feedback and or reinforcement. So the dependent variable in this study is the frequency of appropriate standing for the pledge whenever it was time for the class to stand, exiting the bathroom quickly, and lining up appropriately. This student was observed throughout the entire school day. I sat in the corner of the classroom at a computer desk approximately 5 feet from the participant. During the observation period, the experimenter collected data on inappropriate classroom behaviors. The 3 behaviors observed, including standing for the pledge, exiting the bathroom quickly, and lining up appropriately. A correct response was recorded for appropriately standing for the pledge when the student stood up straight and tall with both feet on the ground, without leaning on tables or chairs. A correct response for exiting the bathroom quickly was recorded when the student exited the bathroom within 10 seconds of drying his hands after washing them. And a correct response for lining up appropriately was defined as getting in line when his name was called or his group. They had little animal groups. Their tables were named after different animals. So once their group was called, without crying or cutting a peer in line. Okay, so the independent variable was the implementation of the say-do correspondence procedure, and it was used as a direct tactic to help increase rule following by the student. It consisted of the vocal SD, which was the rule, by the experimenter, followed by the student's behavior, which resulted in a consequence, either detailed feedback or reinforcement. In his case, his reinforcement were stickers that would go home on a paper with a good note to his parents. So we used a multiple baseline design on the targeted classroom rule following. Once baseline was completed, the phase was conducted for approximately 10 consecutive days. So the weekends didn't count into that. So the procedure. During baseline, classroom instruction time was Monday through Friday, 7:50 to 2:40 p.m. During the baseline, the experimenter observed the student and collected data on the target behaviors. No specific feedback or consequence was given during baseline. For the implementation of the say-do, before the start of each trial, the experimenter would pull the student to the side and review the expected classroom behaviors. For example, before the classroom performed the Pledge of Allegiance, the experimenter pulled the student to the side and reviewed the rules. The script included, the class is about to do the pledge. You're going to stand up nice and tall without leaning on the table. If you stand up nice and tall for the pledge, you get a sticker. The student was then observed for the pledge and given specific feedback after. At the end of the observation, the experimenter pulled the student quietly to the side and made one of the following statements. It may have varied. You stood nice and tall. Oops. You stood nice and tall for the pledge. Great job. You get a sticker. Or you did not stand nice and tall for the pledge. We can try again for a sticker next time. If the student demonstrated the behavior of standing appropriately for the pledge, he was reinforced with a sticker of his choice. If he did not demonstrate the target behavior, specific feedback was given without reinforcement. Once the data was stable or the student achieved mastery on the first goal, the second objective took place. This continued until the third objective was mastered. So here's the results. I don't know if y'all can see my graph well, if it's blurry. At the top, you can see this was standing for the pledge. You see the baseline. Can y'all see my arrow when I point to things? Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure. So there's the baseline, and then when it was implemented until it reached mastery for 2 days. After the 10 days, we implemented for the exiting the bathroom quickly, and then for joining the line quickly. So figure 1 shows the effects of the say-do correspondence training on the students' targeted behaviors. During baseline, the participant stood for the pledge less than 20% of the time. After implementation of the say-do correspondence, his behavior for standing for the pledge increased 100% for 2 days consecutively, with a mean of 60%. During baseline for the second targeted behavior, it was very inconsistent. He had a mean range of a mean of 9.4% of the time that he would exit the bathroom quickly, with a range from 0 to 20%. After implementation, it quickly increased to a mean about 57%. And then lastly, during the baseline, the behavior of joining the line quickly, the beginning had a 7.8% mean with a range between 0 to 20% as well. And it quickly increased to 78.6% with a range of 40 to 100. Okay, so discussion. I told you I'd be quick. So in this experiment, the introduction of the say-do correspondence training resulted in an increase of appropriate classroom behaviors for all 3 targets. The finding of the study is important because they suggest that say-do correspondence training can be an effective tactic in the treatment of problematic behaviors in classroom settings. These findings support those of Whitman and that the treatment was effective to increase all 3 target behaviors for the participant. Future research is suggested to investigate an efficient schedule of thinning for the vocal prompt during the say-do correspondence training. That was my references. I'm trying to fix my screen so that I can continue to chat. I don't know how all this works. Okay, so I'm just gonna chat with my black screen. We did end up fading. I switched clinics. I switched locations, still work for the same clinic, just a different location. But we were able to fade off my vocal prompt to where the client I stopped him, like if he was going to the bathroom, I would stop him and say, "What are we gonna do?" And he would say, "I'm gonna go in the bathroom and I'm gonna leave quickly. And if I leave quickly, I get a sticker." And so after we reached 100% over a couple days with that, we faded off me even talking to him. And whenever he would leave the bathroom quickly, he would just get a sticker. And then eventually we send that reinforcement too. And I'm done.
Awesome. Can you go back to your graph and kind of keep that up there while we talk a little bit?
Yes. Let me try to move this stuff around.
All right, cool. That'll work. Okay, excellent job. Excellent job. I've always have my 2 cents to put in. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions, comments, snaps, anything? What do you guys got? All right, cool. So first off, the first thing I want to say, looking at this graph, nice job making a multiple baseline across behaviors graph. That looks absolutely spectacular.
I was gonna say that too, because mine does not look like
that. No, that's a really nice graph, and I know those aren't easy to get into one picture. Definitely on a PowerPoint. So that's very well done. My biggest question for you, and I don't know if I missed it or if it's the right interpretation. Would you describe this as say do or hear do?
Okay, so it started as a hear do, but we did fade into a say do. I know my
Okay.
PowerPoint wasn't very thorough, but that's what I was trying to like tell you at the end.
Okay.
So it's a hear do, which I probably need to put that in there. And then after he contacted reinforcement over several days for that, he would be in charge of the say do. So then he would say what he should do, and then he would do it and get reinforcement or consequence, whatever.
Awesome. Okay. So I thought that that's what you were kind of getting at the end, but you glossed over it so quickly.
I know, and I talk so fast when I'm nervous, and I couldn't breathe, and I just
No, it's totally fine. So I want to make sure that you got to that point. So I guess my question here, especially as it relates to what we've spoken about in this class in general, is do you think that, I don't think you have a measure of it here, but it's definitely something worth looking at. Do you think we have a generalized say do repertoire after you've gone through the whole thing? So what I mean by that is you had these hear do behaviors and you faded that to teach a say do response. Do you think that the kiddo could use that new reinforcement to emit other say do behaviors?
I think this particular kiddo definitely could. I think it depends on the kid and the situation. But we did see an increase of just rule following in general in the classroom. So if the teacher said, okay, we're going to do this and then this is going to happen, the kid would follow that. So I would say yes for him.
Awesome.
But not for every student, you know.
Okay, so what I would do there, as it specifically relates to this type of project in the future, is have 10 rules, and then do your hear do say do for 3 of them, just like you did, and then measure all 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then do 3 more, and then measure all 10. And what you'd be looking for is, did the untaught ones increase in the absence of intervention as a result of the intervention for the ones that you targeted? So kind of what you're describing, but you don't have the measure for them, right?
I definitely agree.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying, I definitely agree with you, and that would have been an attempt, but the student was in the middle of fading off. ABA because he's just like excelling and doing great, which is our job to, to get them to where they're supposed to be. But if it was a student that I would have been with longer, that definitely would have been a goal.
Okay, good. And I think that starts to touch on like the significance of the specific repertoires versus generalized repertoires, and the change and reinforcement for specific behaviors for versus new conditioned reinforcers. And we want this is a little bit tougher one to analyze in a good way, but we want the behavior of repeating to oneself and listening to contact multiple reinforcers. And that's how you condition the reinforcement for that specific behavior. Like the reinforcement for say do is challenging, because each time you say something and do something, you're going to contact a new reinforcer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I say jump off the diving board, and then I do jump off the diving board, and that scares the hell out of me, then I didn't contact reinforcement for say do. So that conditioning this as a new reinforcer or generalized reinforcer is really tough, but really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in that situation that I just mentioned, for adults who, I can do it, just jump, it's going to be okay, just jump. And then doing it, the act may suck, and I may never want to do that again, but you come out saying, I did it, right? And what you really mean is, I listened to myself and convinced myself to do it. And that's the reinforcer there, So it's such a valuable skill, really cool addressing of it. I would have loved to see if that generalized reinforcement did emerge as a result. Really nice job. Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, Courtney. No? Yeah?
Yeah, I can try to squeeze it in.
Okay, cool. Let's do it quick. Just so we
go
can
over, I'm sorry, but I promise I'll be quick.
That's fine. All right, you can share your screen whenever you're ready. Go ahead and get started.
Your screen. This one. Cool. Is it up there?
No.
No. It says
you
are screen.
You've entered screen sharing. Is it saying that you need to turn screen sharing on or allow Zoom to?
No, it's just frozen.
Oh, well, that's no good.
Uh-oh.
Give it a minute and see what we get.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are all frozen in like weird positions.
No luck?
No, not yet. Let me see. No, my computer's completely frozen.
All right. Well, I think we can. Oh, yeah, I can do that, Caitlin. All right. Courtney, let's go ahead and start with you next week then, okay?
Okay.
And right, okay, cool. Here, I'll say this. So for activity 5, I'm going to move that to next week. I am going to want you to do like a wrap-up analysis of your mentoring stuff. But I want you guys to focus on mentoring this week. get those whatever papers are left to do in, and then we'll worry about the wrap up next week. Okay, sound good? All right. Well, 2 good presentations, about a dozen more to go. We will continue with them next week.
I
And
do have a
there-
question about the
yeah, go ahead.
So how do we handle if our mentor just doesn't send us all of their assignments?
Use this last week or two to really push them. I will figure out what I don't want to give an answer before they have that opportunity to finish up.
Okay, because I've reached out at least twice about projects, but I haven't gotten any like projects or papers from them at all from any of the classes.
Okay. Send me an email and I can do a little following up as well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. Have a good one, and I will see you guys next week. Good night.
Dr. Shaman, could you stay for like 2 minutes?
Yes, I can.
I have a